we met up and decided that we were going to run our own Death Café.
It's a death sentence.
Jayne, welcome to It's a Death Sentence. You came across our podcast, presumably online, did you?
Yeah, I saw it on Spotify. I think I saw it on social media and then I looked it up on Spotify.
Lovely. And you listened doing your ironing. I've just reflected back on our first messages.
Every Sunday when I'm doing my ironing, it's a Death Sentences on.
Oh, lovely. That's really nice to hear. So you're based in Reading, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to you. If you could introduce yourself and tell our listeners who you are and what you do, that would be wonderful.
Okay, my name's Jayne and I am a funeral director. I'm originally from the northeast, but I live down south and only came to the funeral industry 2 years ago.
Okay, very new.
What brought you to the funeral industry?
Oddly enough, it was from personal loss. So my mum died in 2022 and it was probably late 2023, early 2024 when I was looking for a job. And I literally just saw an advert on my Facebook for working in the funeral industry. And I was like, oh, I wonder what jobs are there other than a funeral director. And I went for it and took the job as a funeral service crew, which is like an operative who would bring people into care, people who died, help dress them, get them in their coffin, put them in chapel, and then ceremonial duties, so pallbearing, driving a hearse, driving a limousine. So that's where I started my journey.
So let me ask you, Jayne, prior to that, had you had any experience actually even witnessing a dead body?
Just my mum.
Okay. So how did you feel going into that line of work?
For me, I think I was looking for, in a way, I was looking for a place where it was acceptable to kind of talk about death and dying and grief. And it certainly was in the industry because I found it incredibly difficult after my mum died to find what I was looking for, I think, in terms of being able to talk to people and share things that people just don't talk about.
Yeah. And have you found, since you've been in the industry, you've found it easier to talk to people about death and dying, or have you found that it had to remain quite professional?
No, I think I found it much easier. I was the one that wanted to talk about death and dying. It just felt like no one else did. And I think that's quite common when you've lost someone. You feel like no one knows. You kind of almost want to tell the world, well, that was my experience. And I couldn't believe that everyone else was just carrying on as they were, whilst my world had just imploded.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your mum, Jayne?
Her name was Julia. And she was a brilliant mom, very loving. She'd always just wanted a family. She was very family oriented. She was the youngest of 7, so she always just wanted her own family. She was funny. She was a brilliant cook, and she was my best friend, really. I think we were very close.
And what was the experience you had when she died with the funeral directors you used?
I had an amazing experience. We'd used the funeral directors 4 years previously for my mum's mum. And they were, I can't even really describe it. They were a bit like angels who just swooped in and made everything so easy at such a difficult time when I couldn't really think or make decisions at all. Their guidance was just, yeah, it was expert, and you can tell that they were in the right profession.
Did you have to do a lot of the arranging of that funeral yourself, or have you got siblings or?
I have a brother. Yeah, I've got an older brother, but I arranged everything. Um, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit of a control freak. I like to be in charge. I knew what my mum wanted, and we'd spoken about it. So I dealt with most of the stuff from her death. So I dealt with all of the paperwork side, probate, all that. I dealt with emptying the house and yeah, and the funeral. But I was really lucky because she had written down what she'd wanted, and we had discussed bits of it, not everything, but bits of it.
So when your mum died, were you expecting it? Was she poorly, or was it a sudden death?
No, it wasn't sudden. So she had been diagnosed in June 2022 with terminal cancer off the back of like an A&E visit. So that was shocking. The diagnosis was shocking. She'd just been in a lot of pain, and because she'd suffered a lot with like chronic arthritis and back problems, she thought it was just a flare up of that, and they'd scanned her in case it was her gallbladder. They thought that might be causing some of the pain, and they'd seen something that they didn't like the look of on her liver. So she was diagnosed with secondary liver cancer with an unknown primary at that time, um, which was just so shocking. And I wasn't there because I lived down in Windsor at the time. Um, and it all kind of unraveled from there, really.
Very difficult in that situation if you're not local, isn't it? Because you've got to make that journey, that physical journey, while you're in shock.
Yeah. And as much as I love my brother, I know he's not very good in these situations. He was there, thankfully. At the hospital, they did say to her, "Can you call someone?" So she wasn't alone when she had that news. Um, but it was, yeah, it's really difficult. You feel completely helpless because you're not there, and all you want to do is be there.
So, Jayne, am I right in thinking that alongside your new career, you also do you run or do you help to run a death cafe locally?
Yeah, we do. So I'd looked for death cafes in the area, and there wasn't anything. Closest is London, which, to be honest, isn't very far, but I didn't really want to go into London. So randomly, I actually met another lady who works in the industry. We met at an open day for another funeral directors in London, and we got chatting. And she's like, "Oh, I don't live in London." I was like, "Oh, neither do I." And we both lived in Reading. So her name's Francesca, and it was very much so. And we met up and decided that we were gonna run our own death cafe.
And how have you found that? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going really well. So we've only had two. We ran the first one in October last year, and that had 6 people turn up, which is a massive success in my eyes, because it's hard to get people through the doors with that big D word. Um, and then we literally just ran one 2 weeks ago, our first of the year, and got another 5 people. So 4 very different people who hadn't been before. So it just goes to show that, something is like there's a gap there.
There's a need, isn't there? Were you searching for that when you lost your mum? Was that you were looking for somewhere to go to talk to people who had been through the same sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I was definitely looking more for like grief related stuff. So we always do say with our death cafe, it's not a grief or bereavement support group, although it is part of the conversation of death. But I think I was looking more for real support from others and others who've experienced loss when I lost my mum.
Okay. And alongside the Death Café, like you've not got enough to do, you're also doing something, the Walk and Talk, which is that kind of bereavement support in motion, which I'm a massive advocate of. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant concept.
Yeah, it's something that I only came across towards the end of last year when I'd probably seen someone else running something on social media, and I'd said to Francesca, "Why don't we do that?" Because I'm a true believer that nature is incredibly healing. Just being out in nature, um, and I know that like the classic grief support or bereavement support setting is not for everyone. It can be quite intimidating with going into a room where you're all sat in a circle and it's time to share, and that can be a lot for people. So I think with a walk and talk, you don't even need eye contact with someone. You can just talk with them as you walk. And I think that can be really helpful for some people who find it difficult to open up or be in that situation.
I think the Walk and Talk, I think you coming away from the traditional, either like you've just said, group setting, that circle, that is very intimidating for a lot of people. And even the one-to-one that you might get through counselling or therapy, there was an awful lot of evidence to show that we do better in nature, definitely, and also in motion. So the Walk and Talk concept, I worked for a charity for a while and we did that with our young people. And actually what you would get from them in that environment, rather than come and sit and have a chat, come and tell me what's on your mind, where you're the grown up, for example, or you're the leader, shall we say, it completely changes the dynamic, doesn't it? When we're walk, Carrie and I often walk before we'll record a session because we're kind of brainstorming on foot, aren't we?
Yeah, I do think you probably say different things because it's a very different setting. It was meant to be super informal. Um, yeah, and we've got another one actually because 5 people turned up for that, which was great. So I've organised another one next month. So I'm going to try and run them once every couple of months if I can.
And are these events free for people to go and join?
Yeah, they're free. So at the moment, we're just funding the Death Café ourselves, just renting out the space and providing the cake. But with the walk and talk, you don't need to. There's no overheads with that, so can't really lose.
Mate, I've been through your some of your posts, which we've really enjoyed having a look at, and there's a few that have stood out to me. So if you don't mind, I was going to read some of these out, just get you to have a chat about them. In particular, I really liked the language of death. So your post about the language of death is the kind of phrases that British people in particular tend to use about people who've died. Now, interestingly, we did an episode, which you may have heard, with the ladies from the Primrose Hospice, which is our local hospice, where they are really, really trying to make sure people don't use these ambiguous phrases like passed on and things like that, because she says it's very confusing, isn't it? So some of these I'm just going to read out because I thought they were brilliant. Did you write this post?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. So the final curtain, croaked,
Is kick the bucket on there?
pop your clogs, meet your maker, end of the road, give up the ghost, cark it, bite the dust, which is your soundtrack, isn't it? Brilliant. Brown bread, some Cockney rhyming slang, kick the bucket, snuffed it, 6 feet under, pushing up the daisies, worm food. I loved this. Some of your posts are absolutely brilliant. But in your line of work, do you find most of the time it has to be fairly formal, the language you use?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I'm a massive fan of the direct language of dead, died, but not everyone is a fan of that. People can I don't think take offense is the right word, but they find it really confronting and it's too much for them. So a lot of the time at work, it is the kind of that softly approach of when did they pass away. It it works in that setting, um, and there's only once actually that we had a gentleman in who said, "Don't put all that like faffy language around it. My wife has died. She's dead. And I don't want you to call her my loved one." He was very specific in what he needed, but that's very rare.
Yeah, if actually more people were honest about what they wanted, even if it isn't what you agreed with, wouldn't it make life easier?
Oh, massively so.
If they just, called it what it was, or at least told you what they wanted, it must be a complete relief for you. But like you say, it's rare.
Yeah, you've got to just have those first few 5 minutes of conversation and try and judge what you can say and what you can't say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that working with the other members of your team, that they're much more free with their language when they're talking about the job they do? I do think it comes with the territory. If you work in death, you tend to be more almost flippant, but not disrespectful, but just flippant about the language we use. We definitely do where I work.
I should imagine you do.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. I think there are some people who still, even though they work in the industry, struggle with, when they're talking about death and dying themselves. But yeah, we do. We're very. I think if you can't talk to your colleagues and your friends in the industry about how you feel about it in whatever language you like to use, then you're not going to survive. It's where you get you've got to have that outlet really, because I can't being softly, like the soft approach when you're dealing with people in the direct face of their loss. It's not who I am outside of that setting. So
It's important to be adaptable though, isn't it? To be able to be that person who is soft and able to, sort of talk to families in their darkest moments, but also be able to switch off and be yourself and have your outlet when you're with your work colleagues. It's knowing when the right time to do it is, isn't it? And you're sort of facing families. I'm not. I'm behind the scenes really. So for me, I always still find it quite emotionally draining when I have to deal with a family.
I bet.
Because I really have to think about sort of the language I'm using and make sure that I'm being fully aware of what they want and respecting their wishes and how they want to be spoken to. So if it's part of your job like you get used to that, don't you? Talk the way you can turn it on and off.
I think you can. Yeah, some days I think, particularly if I'm tired or it's been quite an emotional day, because it can be quite exhausting. I really have to concentrate when I'm talking to clients, um, to avoid slipping into like my kind of language.
One of your other posts I found, which was really interesting for me, and I haven't run this one past you because I didn't know whether you know what it was, but it was a post about the Ashes Register. So whereby you can record where you're scattering people's ashes. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. Yeah, it's a brilliant concept. And again, I posted about it because I hadn't heard of it prior to about 6 months ago. Because I scattered my mum's ashes out in the sea, if that's where she wanted to be. Me and my brother just went out on his inflatable kayak and just did it between the two piers and where we live up north. And I can add that to the ashes register because there's no legal requirement to have to say where you scatter people's ashes. One of the things of in families though, like if some time has passed and they're like, "Oh, well, we know we scattered, I don't know, Uncle Bob somewhere here, but no one quite knows where." If it's on there, then you can just go and find it.
Never thought of it like that.
Yeah,
It's
actually handy, to
really
know.
interesting. And then one of the last posts that which I have heard of before, but I don't know a lot about, was what does it mean to witness the charge of a coffin at a funeral? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so the term for actually people watching the coffin go into the cremator is called charge it. Well, it's called charging the coffin. So witnessing that is so after the funeral service, um, the coffin will be on the catafalque and the curtains will close. And then behind the scenes, someone will open the door and take the coffin through to the back of house of the crematorium. They'll place the person on like a trolley and line them up just outside of the actual cremator. And in my local crematorium that I go to a lot, we go into a little side room, which is just off the chapel. And there's a window there, and you can view it through that little room. It's different in every crematorium. Some of them only allow you to actually watch it on a screen, and others you will actually go behind, so you're watching it in person. And they will open up the cremator, they will push the coffin in, or there's an actual automated part of the trolley system that does that, and the people will watch their person go into the cremator.
And how A, how popular is it to do that? And B, how long do they stay for? Because presumably a full cremation must take some time.
Yeah, they literally just see it go in, and then the door will close on the cremator, and that's it. It's minutes. They don't get to see or stand. You wouldn't be able to see anything unless you were physically there looking through the tiny little glass hole of the cremator door anyway.
Are there many people in your experience that want to do this?
I found that it seems to be more a cultural thing. So I work in Slough, and there's a large Sikh and Hindu community in Slough. And we find that, I think, of all of the witness charges that I've been part of, it's been mostly Hindu and Sikh community.
It's interesting that it's a cultural thing. I wonder whether, because I didn't know it was I'm not saying that I'd have particularly wanted to do that with either of my parents, but if it were a choice, I would have certainly had to think about it and see, sit with it for a bit. It's in the same way, really, when you choose to see the body in the chapel of rest. It's only a similar kind of experience, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, because I wasn't aware of it when my mum was cremated. And I think it's something that possibly is only offered to certain cultures. I mean, it's open to everyone, but I think we sometimes possibly wrongly assume that other cultures wouldn't be interested in that.
Yeah. And again, Carrie and I, our whole mission is, to normalise conversations around death and dying, grief. But I wonder if more people were aware of things like that and more people did witness it, it does start to normalise it a bit more. And for some people, it is that kind of that real finality that might be needed as well.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more final than that. And I and part of writing that post was because people aren't aware of it. I don't think people are aware that you could do that at all. I don't know whether I would have done it for my mum. That might have been a step too far, but it's good to have the options, isn't it?
You also asked one of our questions, which you might even know where we're going with this, having listened to some of our interviews, but if you could find out when you were going to die, I already know what your answer is because I read your post, but you also referenced a book that looked really interesting called The Measure.
Yes, by Nikki Ehrlich.
Yeah, okay. So talk to us. Firstly, tell us the answer. If you could find out when you were going to die, would you want to know?
100% yes.
And what's your reasoning behind that?
Because I think part of the fear of death is not knowing when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So if I can take away part of that equation, then, I think if I knew I had years to live, I would relax a little bit and not feel like I had to compress so many things or do so many things. But then if I also knew I didn't have long to live, then it would give me the kick up the bum that I'd need to actually do some of the things that I probably want to do before I die.
If you could make one significant change to conversations around death, dying and grief, what would it be?
Oh, that's a difficult one, isn't it? I think we've covered it already. I think the most significant change I would have is people's people's language and actually using those confronting words, died, dead, death, and yeah, go a little bit away from the lost. I haven't lost someone. I know where they are.
Yeah.
I know they haven't.
And
They haven't passed away.
where have they passed over to? I always wonder where that place is. But there you go.
Yeah. Well, it depends on your beliefs, doesn't it?
Yeah. What do you think happens when you die, Jayne?
I do believe that we are a soul inhabiting like a physical body. So I think that when we die, our soul goes back to wherever it was before we came into this body. I used to have such strong faith in that. But I must admit, when my mum died, I found it really difficult to still believe that. And I'm a massive fan. I go to a spiritualist church regularly, and I do believe that something lives on outside of the body.
Oh, do you have an experience at the spiritualist church you'd be willing to share with us? Anything that they've spoken to you personally?
Yeah, after my mum died, because she died in the November, so she had 5 months after her diagnosis before she died. It was very close to Christmas, so that was the first hurdle, and I was desperately going to the spiritualist church to try and get a message from her. And I know it doesn't work like that. It's usually the people that you don't necessarily know or want messages from that come through. But I'd gotten very upset that day because at that point, all I wanted to know that she was okay, because her death wasn't particularly peaceful. I found it looked harrowing to her, and it was harrowing for us. It's not the movie style death, which is all I'd been accustomed to, having not witnessed anyone die before. So I just wanted to know that she was okay. And I'd had her ashes back at this point, and I said to her, I was crying, and I said, I just need to know you're all right. And then I went to the church and sat through the whole of the service, and the lady who was doing the mediumship on stage, she was like, "Oh, I'm finished. I'm finished." And then she went, "Oh, I'll maybe give it one more." And she did try again, and she says, "Oh, I have a lady here, who's not been in the spirit world very long, and who passed away due to cancer." And there was a couple of hands went up in the room. I think there was 3 of us put our hand up. And she said, "Oh, this lady's saying that she was cared for at home." And my hand was still up because I cared for my mum at home so she could die at home. And the other 2 ladies put their hand down. And I think this is the one message that I've had that I really did believe, because there was just some things that she said that she couldn't have known. So before my mum died, I'd said to her, if there's any way for you to tell me that you're okay, will you please do that for me? And my mum had said yes, she would. But so the medium knew about that conversation. She said, "You had that conversation." And I said, "Yeah, we did have that conversation." She said, "Well, this is her saying that she's all right, that she's okay." Um, yeah, there was a couple of things in there. I feel like everything. There's some things that don't make sense, but there was so much that did make sense in what she was saying.
Would you say that you were a follower or a believer of that type of spirituality prior to losing your mum, or did that come with the territory of loss?
No, I've always felt like that. In fact, my mum, I think, was the first one to take me to a spiritualist church when I was 16. So, and over the years, I think usually when things had happened in my life, big things, and I was struggling, I would go back to that. But I used to go regularly at the time of her death. It was just a huge relief. It was a massive comfort. And just to tell my brother, who is a complete non-believer and won't talk about it, even he found comfort in that, and other family members.
Before we leave you, I think let's just bring the interview back to your industry. Do you have any advice that you would give to somebody who is looking to get into this industry, who perhaps wants to become a funeral director?
I would say just apply for jobs. Just go in there. I mean, I've only been a funeral director for a year. So the first year I was the funeral service crew. And then, yeah, or you can go for a funeral arranger's role, anything that will get you kind of access to that kind of industry. Because the problem with the funeral industry is that you never really know how you're going to react until you start to do the job.
We have heard that from somebody else recently. I can't remember one of the interviews. And it makes so much sense, because how would you know?
There's quite a high turnover of staff in the industry because you never really know how you're going to react to being around people who are dead.
And it's not for everybody, is it? You know, let's face it, not everybody wants to work in that environment. They think they will be okay, and actually when it comes to it, they're not.
And it goes back to what you said earlier as well, like we've got this notion of what death might look like prior to actually seeing it. And sometimes it does look peaceful and serene, and sometimes it looks like somebody who's been really poorly for ages and it's not very nice.
Or decomposed, or...
In your case, could be absolutely anything, couldn't it? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, maybe. So your advice would be get a foot in the door and...
Try it before you buy it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there's anything else you can do, really. Either that or, like, work in maybe a local crematorium or a bereavement office or, anything within that.
Do you get immense satisfaction from your job now that you're a funeral director? Do you feel like you're giving
calling?
Mm.
To those people what the funeral directors gave you when your mum died?
I'd love to think I was giving that, I'd love to think I was that good. Not sure I'm there yet. I do feel it's such a rewarding thing to do. And it wasn't the whole reason of going into the industry. I was trying to find a way to heal, really. But I also wanted to help people who were going through that, because I'd been there. And it definitely would not have been a calling I would ever have thought that I would do prior to my mum dying.
Well, Jayne, thank you so much for this interview. We've really enjoyed talking to you. And again, thank you for supporting our podcast. We would love to maybe speak to you again, perhaps in another year's time, see how you're getting on.
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning into It's a Death Sentence. Please keep listening to our weekly episodes.
And if you like our show, please like, share and subscribe.
We are dying to talk to you.